Hi, y'all. Welcome to Snack Chat
Hey,
with
what's
Gina and
up?
Tina. Here we go.
I love that our names rhyme. It makes it so much more fun.
Yeah, it does. Or confusing. I'm not sure, but I'm going to go with fun.
Yes,
Yeah.
fun. All right, Gina, what
Um,
are we talking about today?
we are talking about eating disorder level of care. Cool.
Cool,
So
cool.
we are going to go over the various levels of care. Again, this is a snippet, a little snacky chat of this information. And so we're just kind of whetting your palates. See all the food references I keep tapping into? I think it's good. I really am proud of
I
myself.
like it.
Yeah. So the
Solid.
levels of care we're going to chat about today is outpatient care, intensive, outpatient and partial hospitalization, residential, inpatient, and then challenges and considerations to think about with these levels of care. So we're kind of going to go in, I don't know if it's the reverse, but it's like the less amount of care and then work our way up. And so this is the level of care that Gina and I currently work in, which is outpatient level of care. And so this is the level of care that has the least restrictive care and ultimately the least amount of hours of support. And I always think of these moments where it's like, ooh, the client's coming and they're seeing us 1 hour or 2 hours a week, and the rest of the time they have all this space for their struggles. So really kind of, this is the level of care where you really need to jam pack resources that's specific to the client. So it is really hard. I think this is the most challenging level of care as a provider because we see the client less, and it actually puts more accountability onto the client to be open and honest because we don't really know what's happening behind closed doors, and we only really have what the client is providing to us. So this can be really helpful. This level of care can be helpful if we're maybe having clients where it's like they're starting to have some behaviors or thoughts or patterns. And so this can really present as the earliest interventions of support, or it can be the reverse where the client is stepping down and we are actually the ongoing support that the client is experiencing. It is so important that there is a massive team here for really success in someone's recovery, especially if they are really or have struggled with an eating disorder or disordered eating in regards. So that would be a doctor, psychiatrist, therapist, maybe a support group, a recovery coach, parents, loved ones. It is really important that there are various members involved. Do you have anything to
And just
add,
to,
Gina?
I was gonna say, just to wrap up outpatient, I think something that can happen at this stage is we can often get clients, we're the first person they see. So outpatient, you might be the first provider they see, but they might not be necessarily appropriate for that level of care. It might be like the window into treatment. So
Right.
the clients might not always be like at this like really stable, ready to do the work kind of stage in outpatient, even though there's a lot lack of support at that stage. So this
Yeah.
is where these other levels come in. So I'll hop into talking about
Awesome.
IOP and PHP, which is intensive outpatient and partial hospitalization programs. These are basically day treatment where an individual might be there anywhere between, like, say, 3 days a week, 3 hours a day, upwards of, for partial hospitalization, maybe, even up to 7 days a week, 5 to 12 hours a day. So the amount of time can really vary, but the basically going to be getting more support at this level of care. Yet they have the medical stability and safety and maybe environmental safety to be able to be home, engaging in their life to some extent. At IOP, really engaging in their life. At PHP, maybe more just for like 1 or 2, meal or snack, sleeping at night, kind of having a place to be for that and not needing that 24-hour medical monitoring. But that outpatient wasn't enough to get them the support they needed. Maybe they needed more consistent observation, more support with actual active eating, which they can get at these levels of care, maybe more group support and having the surrounding kind of peers to learn from, and just more access to their providers.
Right. I think the key in this is that they go home or go to some sort of apartment, sober living, whatever it may be. And so there is potential and space for them to enter into their life and not be monitored and protected, and they can go home and engage in behaviors. And so this is kind of that experimentation to see, like, how is it living in life without this constant monitoring. For some individuals, it's really great. They're able to apply the skills learned in treatment and wean back into their life and utilize external support. For others, this is just more information to where it's like, that level of care is actually not enough, because we're noticing any chance you get on your own, you are surrounded by your eating disorder and now engaging in behaviors. And so that kind of transitions us to the next level of care above IOP and PHP, which is residential. And this is a higher level of support, 24/7 monitoring. This also would mean that the individual is needing more medical monitoring most often. Yes, they are getting consistent meal support and staff support and maybe more nutrition and therapeutic support, but really what we're seeing is that they actually are monitored more consistently by someone in the medical field, whether that's a nurse assistant, doctor, psychiatrist. It depends on the facility, but they are receiving more so of that medical support. One of the major benefits of this is that this individual gets really constant community support. So if they're having a harder time, thoughts are a little bit louder, they really have the access to check in with someone at that residential facility at any point. And so it is really this like safety bubble to provide them with this thought reframing if they're going to utilize it there. One thing that's here, they do not go home. They live at this facility, which a lot of times is just a house, right? So they are not going back home into their own environment. They have more structured meal planning that's kind of assigned. I hate to say that, but it's like recommended. Here's this structured meal plan and specific goals and interventions that are set up by the rest of the team.
Yeah, my kind of final thing to add there too would be at this level of care, depending on the facility, not at every residential facility, but at some, tube feeding, could potentially be an option as well. Clients who are really needing more nutrition and having trouble getting it in via food might be able to access that at a residential, but that might also be a sign that, if someone's really not doing well at this level of care, or often we see, transition to inpatient straight from outpatient, where someone kind of has an episode, maybe a concern at a pediatrician appointment, low heart rate, or a passing out, kind of fainting episode, and then they end up ending up directly in inpatient, which is that highest level of care. This is typically in a hospital setting. There are some specific inpatient treatment facilities, and then some residential facilities have a few beds within their residential that are considered their inpatient. So it can be at a residential, it can be at a separate facility or at a hospital facility. And this is going to be 24/7 medical monitoring. So at inpatient, there isn't going to be a lot of therapeutic nutrition counseling work going on. And it's much more about nutrition rehabilitation and stabilization, kind of in whatever means necessary. So usually this is a shorter term stay with the idea that they're going to then transition into maybe a residential facility to kind of have that more long-term treatment and step down.
Yeah. So with all these levels of care, there are challenges and things to consider. So individuals may need different levels of care and may not be placed in that level of care. So you may be working with someone at a level of care that is inappropriate for them, and they don't have accessibility to go to the right level of care. And so that in and of itself, it makes your job really, really difficult. And you are entitled to kind of set your own philosophy and boundaries around that, whether you work with the client at that inappropriate level of care and or refer out. So just throwing that onto you, you are entitled to make that decision for yourself. It is really important that there is collaboration between treatment providers, clients, and their support network. Otherwise, these levels of care don't really transfer back out into real life. It's just temporary phases of fake life that then they enter into their real life and go, wait, I didn't actually learn anything. You just gave me food, right? Another thing to recognize is that treatment centers are not accessible and safe for all individuals. And so I think it is really important that you are assessing your client and their lived experience, individual needs, and making sure that the facility that you're recommending is actually going to be meeting their lived experience. I think it's really a lot of treatment centers share that they work with all clients, but when you actually go in, it isn't necessarily true. Maybe representation isn't there in staff. Maybe a client is being misgendered. Maybe religious beliefs aren't being honored. Maybe their specific eating disorder, like ARFID, they are being placed in a group with someone that struggles with anorexia and their needs aren't being met. And so I do think part of our responsibility is making sure that we are referring the client to a treatment center that can best meet their lived experience needs.
Yeah, so not only looking at the level of care, but also the actual facility. And luckily, we have lots of great reps throughout the country who work for different treatment centers and kind of help you understand what facility might be the best one for that individual, and other life circumstances as well that might lead to a harm reduction approach, which means that even though this client might benefit from a higher level of care, they actually can't access it because of finances or because of a current job situation or children at home or something that means they're going to have to actually stay at a lower level of care. So then what kind of approaches do you use in those situations? And I did want to just put out there that there is virtual treatment options as well. So we talked about different levels of care. We are seeing more IOP, PHP type programming being run virtually now. So if going to a facility might not be an option, virtual could be a potential option for some individuals as well. And then I want to point out as well that I know that some insurance companies require this kind of idea of a client has to fail at a lower level of care before being approved for higher level of care. That's not always the case, but that is the case for some. What does fail mean? It means that they're struggling, and that's actually like quote from insurance company. So it does mean that there may be times where a client is at a level of care that might not seem like the best fit, but they might have to start there.
Right. Oh, insurance, why we love insurance. Insurance also kind of dictates the person's treatment. They need to meet specific criteria, or insurance may cut early. And so there are just a lot of barriers in kind of this whole system. And so it's not a perfect system, but this is kind of a brief layout of what is currently available. So, all right, y'all, that's what we have for you today. Little snack chat snippet. Feel free to check out our other videos and stay tuned for the longer version of this in the future. All right. Have a good day.